Right, back to our top story now. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa testifying at the state capture inquiry shortly in less than half an hour. If I look at the clock just in front of me there, well, my colleague Thulasizwe Simelane outside the venue for us ahead of this. Thulas, good morning once again. And I suppose there's so many questions, and you have to wonder if 4 days, 2 of them with the Cyril Ramaphosa as ANC president, and then the other 2 next week with him as president of the country, will that be enough to get the answers to the questions we have?
The sun is hot.
That's part of what I'm looking forward to, Yuveka. I'm also asking myself what the tone will be in this interaction between the evidence leader, whoever the evidence leader is, that will be leading the stream around politics. And I have not, been able to confirm, but at the top of my head, I cannot remember who is the evidence leader that tends to lead the evidence that has to do with politics, the intersection between politics, money and corruption. I can't remember that right now, but that's key in that, will it be a tone that's probing? Will it be a tone that presses the president to give more in instances where, he's not giving as much as he should be, but also questions of in instances where he's being a politician in giving a long-winded answer, but that doesn't really address the question being asked. Will the evidence leader have that style? Because they all have different styles. Will they have that style to say, actually, Mr. President, this is the question I'm asking, not what you are answering? How much deference will be there to the president? Hopefully not much, because the questions have to be asked. South Africans have all these questions about what the role of the ANC has been, the role of the former ANC deputy president has been, and now the ANC president in these issues of corruption. As you can imagine, of course, politics playing itself out as well on the sidelines of today's hearing. And among the people who have turned up here is COPE leader Musiwa Likota. It's good to see you, Mr. Likota. Just tell me how important today is. I suspect that your mere presence here suggests that you read today as being pivotal.
Well, yes, this is very important for us. You must remember that we were inside the African National Congress. We started observing some of the activities which indicated to us that the organization was taking a route that was not in the interest of South Africa and of the people. And we warned about that from inside the ANC. And when we got to Polokwane and so on, we were really, that was where the blood hit the ground. And after that, we said the leadership that was going to come out of there would indicate whether the ANC would stick to the commitment of working for the people or something else. And after that, we realized, no, the horses bolted.
Yeah.
And that's why we decided, therefore, that we can no longer stay on.
Yeah.
And that's why we left. So we are keen to hear what those who decided that, no, this is the right course to go. They must tell us what is the things that convinced them this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it's resulted in all these problems.
I suspect that in terms of the specific instances of corruption and state capture, many people have specific questions that they would like the president to answer. You as COPE, do you have a sense of that list of questions that you think he should not be allowed to leave the room without answering these questions?
No, once we had left there, we could not be part of what was going on. So we cannot have the details of what was being done and what was not being done. We were not sitting in the meetings of the NEC of the ANC anymore. But we are convinced that those who were in the leadership there, like the president, the current president, who was the deputy president of Zuma and became head of government business, was at the center of it. He was essentially in a position in which he made sure that the operations to implement decisions that had been taken are going on as they should. So we would hope that he would take the country into confidence.
Yeah.
To say how things happen.
And I imagine, though, that you're not a disinterested observer in what becomes of the ANC, right? Given that you are in opposition,
yes,
and in opposition for a reason, in
yes,
that you think you can do a better job, better than the ANC.
We certainly hold that view.
How much is riding on this, on today, in terms of what South African viewers and voters should be taking from this ahead of the elections 2021, but also future elections, in terms of, how accountable the ANC has been on issues of corruption?
If South Africa is to correct itself, the people of this country must be taken into confidence and be given the truth. Once they got that truth, we are convinced that they will see that these are not the people we should have trusted, and even now we must look for other men and women who can be trusted to work in the direction that we had been promised in the Freedom Charter and all of the conferences afterwards.
All right, Mr. Lukoto, thank you so much. In fact, before I let you go, let me take advantage of your institutional memory
yes,
and knowledge, because you were there in the early days
yes,
of President Nelson Mandela's cabinet, etc. Juxtaposing what's happening today in having a sitting president sitting in the witness chair of a commission of inquiry, quasi-legal in its nature, inquisitorial in its nature, and not adversarial, and juxtaposing with the history of former President Nelson Mandela while he was serving as president, appearing in court as a witness, facing questions and being cross-examined, and throwing in the recent events around former President Jacob Zuma. What's your thinking there? Is it still as historic as some would suggest, or, President Ramaphosa appearing while being a sitting president has lost the significance in that former President Nelson Mandela broke that taboo, that actually a sitting president is as equal before the law as any other citizen and should face questions if the need arises?
I am very interested to see whether he will be as open as any honest citizen to then say to the people, we took a decision to do this, and our reasons were the following, that. In our meetings with the Guptas and so on, we had these agreements done and so on, because that is what he would have done. I'm curious to see it. Will he be as frank and open as President Mandela would have been? When we said the Congress of the People, I said to our people, we must be men and women of the truth. We cannot say things somewhere in the corner, and when we appear before the people, tell a different story. Then that is not what's going to take us where we are going to go.
Right. Co-President Musiwa Lukoto, I've got to thank you, and the reason I'm rushing now, Yuveka, take a look at that live visual we are showing you. The cars that are coming through, the motorcade. We had our eyes trained on that entrance. That is the motorcade of the president. In fact, it seems to be police cars, not necessarily the entire motorcade, making its way towards the entrance. So we've had our eyes trained on this particular entrance, because that seems to be the entrance that is used by these VIP vehicles and presidential protection vehicles. And we do this, Yuveka, because, with time, you learn to anticipate how things will play out. So from the history of former President Jacob Zuma having come here a couple of times, we sort of have a sense that, well, I can say we anticipate that this is usually the entrance that is preferred for them to usher in the president and the former president. So we're going to stay with these visuals as you see that motorcade coming to the front, the motorbikes, the lead vehicles, and they'll be making their way into the basement parking, where then from there President Ramaphosa will then make his way into the old Johannesburg council chambers. So this is part of anticipation. It's what you do, what camera people do. There you have it, the vehicles arriving. Let me just keep quiet for a moment as we take in the sights and sounds.
Well, Well, Thulas, as we see that, I mean, it does sort of give you those goosebumps, just the significance of today as well. And I have to sort of ask you, I mean, in terms of security, I'm sure this inquiry hasn't seen a security the likes of today in all the time that it's actually been sitting.
No, not really, Yuveka. It's not that intense. We did see this level of security when former President Jacob Zuma was appearing a few months ago, or when he was scheduled to appear. In fact, when he did appear before leaving, and I think that was in November last year. And that's because you had a couple of groups that had a keen interest in picketing outside, as you do today. There is a bit of a sense of, police presence. You are seeing, I saw one or two police nyalas that are parked outside, and more SAPS activity around. As I did mention, you are seeing a few members of political parties and activists who are standing outside. I want to release Ntate Mosewali Kota Yuveka. He's been standing here, quite kindly. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate your time. You are free now, and you can proceed to make your way inside the hearing venue. And I've got to mention and credit to the team there, Yuveka, in terms of anticipation. You get into this drill, you sort of start knowing which side to look before the person does arrive for the hearing. As you were talking about the vehicles themselves, Yuveka, perhaps it's symbolic. The vehicles in a way represent the trappings of power. These are people that used to be activists for the liberation of South Africa. Some of them were in exile, some of them were on Robben Island, the likes of Mosewali Kota. Some of them were active in mass-based organizations, the likes of President Cyril Ramaphosa in the UDF. Then the organization that was the spearhead of that struggle became a governing party with all the trappings of power that come with it. And now that's partly why we are here today, in that how did they deal and respond to the trappings of that power? And in a way, those vehicles and the power that comes with occupying that office and other sites of power in society is partly why the ANC finds itself not necessarily on trial in the sense of a criminal or civil trial, but certainly on trial in as far as the court of public opinion is concerned, in how they handled themselves once they had the trappings of power.
Well, Thulas, on that note, I mean, as much as we are watching the president himself, Cyril Ramaphosa, we're also watching who accompanies him to the state capture inquiry today, and what story that tells, because of the factionalism that we know is so inherent in the ANC at the moment.
Absolutely. So today being the 28th, tomorrow is the last day, for example, for people in the position of the ANC Secretary General, Ace Magashule, to either step aside from their positions because they are facing corruption charges and other serious charges, who are charged with other serious crime. They have until tomorrow to step aside or face suspension. So the tug of war has never been more intense inside the ANC, with over the months a distinct sense that perhaps you are dealing here with two organizations within one organization inside the ANC. President Cyril Ramaphosa comes here as a man who's been fighting back in a way inside the ANC to try and assert his factions and his National Executive Committee's authority inside the ANC with those guidelines about stepping aside when you're facing charges of corruption. But I've also seen in the last few months, last few weeks, Yuveka, people such as Paul Mashatile coming to the fore a bit more. You've seen people who are supporters of the president speaking out, the likes of Enoch Godongwana, are starting to be more vocal in some of these issues in terms of asserting what the stance is. For instance, some of the pronouncements of people such as Rob Davis, in as much as he was launching a book, some of those pronouncements are not coincidental. Such coincidences are very rare if they happen in politics. So there's that element playing itself out at the moment. But also remember, the ANC Secretary General ended up not being the one to represent the ANC a few weeks ago. It ended up being Gwede Mantashe, who is the national chairperson. Some will say that was because he was Secretary General at the relevant times that are subject to this Commission of Inquiry, in that the Secretary General office directs the activities of the ANC in various sites of power, including Parliament, and holding the executive to account. Others will say, well, this is interesting. We ended up not getting at the moment to have Ace Magashule in his capacity as ANC Secretary General, but we ended up with Gwede Mantashe. Read into that what you may, but you are absolutely right. There are organizational dynamics that are at play, at least in the background.
And I think also, you know, just looking at the rock and the hard place that Cyril Ramaphosa will find himself in, Thulas, I mean, to be asked the question, how much did you know, what did you do about it? If he came out and said, listen, there was very little I can do or I could do, or even now as president, very little. Or on the other hand, people saying, but you had the power to do something and you didn't. So it makes you question, who is Cyril Ramaphosa in the ANC if he had the power but actually couldn't do anything about it? Who stopped him? What stopped him?
It will be difficult for him to plead ignorance of some of the wrongdoing and malfeasance that has happened over the years, especially once he was ANC Deputy President as well as Deputy President of the Republic. One can't imagine a situation where the likes of Pravin Gordhan, who had and continues to have strong feelings about what was going on during the Zuma years, didn't have conversations, side conversations at the very least, with the then Deputy President to say, are you seeing what I'm seeing? X, Y, and Z has happened around this matter. The likes of Mcebisi Jonas, I'm not saying that, you know, I'm privy to their conversations. I'm just saying that I can't imagine a situation where comrades who share a view about the direction that the party and the country is going didn't compare notes and didn't speak to one another. It then raises the question of collective responsibility. You remember that phrase from 2016, how former President Jacob Zuma and former Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa dabbed their way to a terrible election performance in the local government elections in 2016. They were taking collective responsibility and they were collectively punished by South Africans as the ANC in 2016. So I do expect that at the very least he should be honest enough about this. Lastly, Yuveka, President Cyril Ramaphosa has described the ANC as accused number one in as far as corruption is concerned. How much does he then own up to his actions or inactions in getting the ANC to that point of being accused number one on corruption in